All right, the next couple of videos I'm going to talk a little bit about perspective, which is going to be a challenge because usually I spend 3 classes on perspective, and I'm going to try to condense it down into 2 short videos. But we'll give it a shot here. So what is perspective, first of all? Perspective is it's a drawing device that artists came up with in order to create a unified sense of space and distance and volume. And one of the gifts that it gives us is not just allowing us to make space and volume happen, but also it gives us sort of a larger way to think about what we're seeing, and it creates a certain kind of logic for us to hold on to as we look at objects, and all these different lines that are out there that seem kind of random. They're actually related to one another if we think about them in the context of a unified spatial system, which is what perspective is. So, like when we look at so this rectangular solid that's up here, and you look at the one that I've drawn, you look at this and you say, well, it just looks kind of off and wonky, and we've probably all had that experience of drawing a cube or something and not quite looking right. And you could say, well, it's just a matter of looking more and getting those lines to relate to one another better, and that's true, but there's also an underlying logic as to why the lines up there are doing what they're doing. And if we understand that, and that's what perspective gives us, then we can use looking to help correct ourselves, but we can also use our brain, what we know to be true in terms of this logic that perspective gives us, so that we can both look and we can understand why we're seeing what we're seeing. So perspective is extremely important, not just for sort of building buildings or making buildings and so forth in architecture, but it also allows us to make sense of the lines that we see on the figure or flowers or whatever. It applies to everything. Now, perspective was an idea that was created by artists. It's not completely true to life, but it's a very good facsimile for the way the world looks to us up to a certain point. But it was a system that's based on lines, and straight lines in particular. So it feeds very nicely into what we've been talking about with the envelope and with angular drawing. This is a system that's based on straight lines. So the mother form is a rectangular solid. So you look at the rectangular solid and you say, well, it's, what does that got to do with most of what I'm going to be drawing? And it has everything to do with it, because in order to apply perspective, you have to first be able to look at an object and relate it to a rectangular solid. So we look at the world and we kind of imagine the different things that we see in the world as being boxed inside a rectangular solid. So if we understand how the lines on a rectangular solid work in terms of perspective, then we can apply that to more complex forms. Okay. So perspective, the whole system is based on a single viewpoint, which is the artist, and that artist's eye level. So all of these lines and so forth are going to organize around this idea of an eye level. And the eye level is simply the physical level of your eye. So this is my eye level right here. And it doesn't matter if I look up or I look down, this is my eye level. My eye level only changes if I physically go up or down. All right, so when I look at this rectangular solid up here, right now that's below my eye level, right? That's below it. So I need to articulate that to myself now when I draw things. Where are they relative to my eye level in order to make sense of perspective? All right, so real quickly, I'm going to put in a line here which represents my eye level. And in perspective, that's also called the horizon line. So the same thing as your eye level. And if I'm drawing a rectangular solid below my eye level, like this one here, then what artists realized is that when they were devising this system was that in order to create a sense of space, you had to get the lines that are moving away from you, or the edges of things as they moved away from you, had to get smaller, right? Because that's our visual experiences. Like if you see me up front here, I'm bigger. If I move back here, I get smaller, right? So that's a lot of what perspective does, really. Like when you look at these complicated books, a lot of it is just an idea that will allow artists to make things get smaller as they go back in a consistent way. Right? So this is the line that's closest to me, this line here. And that's called the near corner. So the corner of the object that's closest to me is near corner. All right, so then I've got these sidelines here. They're moving back like this. And what artists who devise perspective realized is that in order for this back edge to be smaller than this front edge, which it is because it's further away from us, right? So this is the one that's closest to us. That's further back in space. So this line needs to be smaller than this one. So the way they achieve that is by making these lines that are moving away from us in space, to make those converge, sort of go together. And they converge at sort of a mythical place on your eye level. I'm not really being perspectively correct here, but they're going to converge to a place at your eye level called the vanishing point, which we don't really need to make too much of here. The main thing is to realize that as lines are moving away from you, they're converging with their partner lines in order to make a back edge that's smaller than a front edge. So what we determined very quickly is when we see a rectangular solid, there are 6 planes in a rectangular solid, and those 6 planes are divided into 3 groups of 4 lines. So they're like line families, and they're related to one another in a particular way. So we'll call them A, B, and C lines. So my A lines here, these vertical posts, they stay parallel to one another in a 1 and 2 point perspective anyway. And so in perspective, you've probably heard of 1, 2, 3 point. So they're different variations on the same game, basically. So, but these A lines are going to stay vertical and parallel. So when we look at an object like this, we immediately know that those vertical lines can't be doing this or that. They've got to stay parallel to one another. Right. Then we have 2 sets of converging lines, and we'll call those B lines. So these lines here are B lines, and their relationship is that they're all going to the same vanishing point. So they're related in that they're converging with one another. You don't even have to think about them necessarily going to the same vanishing point. That's how we sort of make them converge. But the idea is that those lines are going to be converging with one another. And then the C lines are 4 lines. So we only see 3 of the 4 of each of these here. So the C lines are going to a different vanishing point over here. So their relationship is that they are collecting together, converging to a different vanishing point. So we have A lines, B lines, C lines. So anything that we look at in nature, we can see in terms of those A, B, and C lines if we can apply the rectangular solid to that more complicated form that we're seeing in nature. So there starts to become a logic. And the logic here is that if something's below your eye level and you're seeing one corner closer to you than all the others, in other words, you're not seeing the object straight on from the front, because if we saw it straight on from the front, then that object would look like this, right? We wouldn't see the sides. We wouldn't see the sides of it. We'd just see the front if we were directly in front of it. But here it's turned towards us or around to the side. So if we have that one edge that's closest to us, then everything else is going to get smaller as it goes away from it, right? And if it's below our eye level, from this line, which again is called the near corner, the corner that's closest to us, or the near edge, however you want to think of it, the lines are going to move upward, right? These lines here, 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 all these lines, as they move away from that point, are going uphill because they're kind of moving up towards our eye level, right? So, and the further below our eye level, the more steeply uphill those lines are going to run. So they start flattening out as they approach our eye level. And if I drew another object like this above my eye level, so if I have a near corner, the opposite would be true. These lines would move downhill then as they moved away from our near corner. Something above our eye level, the line's going to move down from that near corner. And again, they're going to move downhill at a lesser and lesser angle. And if they come right down to my eye level, then it's just going to be a horizontal. So below my eye level, things are moving uphill, a little bit less steep, a little bit less steep, a little bit less steep. At my eye level, it's horizontal. And then as I go above, those lines are going to move downhill, downhill, downhill from that from that near corner. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for the rectangular solid. Now this, the angles that these take are going to depend how how far to the left or to the right you are of the near corner. In other words, these lines are not always going to be the exact same angle upward. They're both going to go upward, but they're going to move upward at different rates depending if you're around to one side a little bit more or the other. So the side that you're around to a little bit more is going to be flatter, a little bit flatter movement uphill. That far side is going to be a little bit more angled upward. So what you should do is find some kind of box-like element and to just, after you've listened to this video, to go and just try to see how this actually relates. So this actually happens in nature. I'm not just making it up. So, so get a box and turn it, put it above your eye level, put it below your eye level, see how these lines work. Okay. All right, and in the next video, we'll apply this to more complicated forms.